Okay.
Welcome to Porch Play Chat, sponsored by the American Association for the Child's Right to Play, or our little shortened title, IPA-USA, which is because we're the USA affiliate of the International Play Association. And as part of our efforts to promote play, we've introduced Porch Play Chats. There are more than 200 now of them available on our website at IPAUSA.org. Up in that right top corner is our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, our Spotify link, our Instagram. So if you follow, subscribe, be a friend, every Monday, magically, a new Porch Play Chat appears in your feed. I'm Deb Lawrence, and I'm president of IPA USA. And with me on the porch today is Stacy Benge. Did I say that right, Stacy?
You did. Yes, you nailed it.
So Stacy is an early childhood speaker who approaches learning in the early years with practicality and common sense. Wow, are we not? We're missing that, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
And, oh my. Standing firm on the truth that children learn best through simple, authentic experiences. She advocates for child-led play to build solid foundations for child development. Stacy is the author of a new book, The Whole Child Alphabet: How Young Children Actually Develop Literacy, published by Exchange Press. So I just have to say one thing about that. You know, I'm a professor of early childhood. We talk about language and literacy. We talk about authentic experiences. We talk about reading books to children. We talk about singing songs with children. We talk about without interrupting, but describing what it is that we see them doing, adding new vocabulary words. We do all that. And then when it comes time to submit a play experience plan, they still struggle and think it's all about letters. It is driving me crazy. And so
Yeah.
I've developed several strategies to sort of help them sort of be able to apply that. But boy, it just seems like because of their own unique experiences, when it came time to learn to read, letters seemed to be the focus versus vocabulary. So I'm very excited for your topic, which is developing literacy through play. And how do child-led play opportunities for children develop those fundamentals? Boy, do we need this?
Yeah. Well, and kind of like to your point on the alphabet, and even though the book is titled, The Whole Child Alphabet, and I look at alphabet knowledge, but really the whole point is, the alphabet, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient on its own. Like there's so much, that goes into supporting eventual readers and writers. And we need to look at that development, instead of what do we teach, what needs to develop. And, I think that kind of changes our perspective on it. So, but before children learn the alphabet, certain things need to be in place. But yeah, children can't develop these foundational skills actually without that child-led play component.
Right, right. And so if I'm a teacher in a classroom and it doesn't matter what age, it could be infants, toddlers, preschool, kindergarten, first, second, third, fourth grade. And I want to have some like tricks or tools in my toolbox that I could use every day to support children's language and literacy. What might some of those be?
I think it's just really allowing children to control the environment or to control their play. And I think that there are things like we need to allow conversations, but one of the things I really kind of focused on in the book is us as the adults kind of stepping back and letting the children actually take the lead with it. And and I think like us finding opportunities without interrupting the play, like maybe through like our meal times and our transition times, having those open-ended conversations that are relevant to the children. And like you mentioned earlier, the reading the books and singing the songs. But I think really and truly it's us really recognizing that, excuse me, through the experiences of child-led play, that children are developing those phonological awareness skills that are needed to support, reading and writing. They're developing the visual processing, which is beyond eyesight. It's the brain actually understanding what's coming in through the eyes. That develops through play. Before children can actually write, they need that physical development. So they need to be like on the playground, climbing. They need that big body movement. But I think it's us just totally being able to look at the play and go, these things are happening, even though it might not be categorized as literacy based. But these play experiences are developing these foundations that do support literacy.
Well, and I think that is what's hard for teachers, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
difficult for them to say, well, I'm just standing here. Well, you shouldn't just be standing there. You should be making notes. You should be
Mm-hmm.
picking on children's interests. You should be,
Uh-huh.
extending those interests, right? You should be asking questions occasionally, not, 10 open-ended questions an hour, which used to be the rule. And I was like, oh my God, really,
Yeah.
people?
Yeah.
Authentically asking questions if children, it would be so funny when I was a kindergarten teacher. Children would say, how do you spell M-O-M? How do
Yeah.
you spell mom? And I would say, well, you just did M-O-M.
Uh-huh.
And they would say, oh. And I said, yeah. So do you do you remember how to make an M and an O and an M? And they would say, no, I need help. And I'd say, what's the M? Where could you find that? And so I led them to the answer, not gave them the answer, right? And they would look around the room, oh, it's over there. I can go look over there. And I
Mm-hmm.
go for it, wonderful. And so it is that permission
Mm-hmm.
for you as a teacher to let children play and not think that you have to be directing them
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
And I think it's us changing that mindset that just because we're not directing the activity does not mean that we're not an active participant. We still, like you said, we need to be watching and observing and documenting, and that helps us with what do we need to bring into the environment that is relevant to the children and their worlds. And then I also think a very powerful connection is us being available. So if a child, like you said, if they come to you and say, how do you spell this, or will you come play with me, or can you come help me with this, that we actually can be present in that moment and
Mhm.
not be like rushed, okay, no, I've got to do this, and get on to a small group or whatever. But we can actually take that time and go sit down and have the conversation they want to have, or look at that picture that they've drawn that they want us to really appreciate. And or if they ask us how to spell something, and my philosophy is if they're asking us, it's important to them. And if we
Mhm.
follow what's important to them, it's way more effective. And that's what results in knowledge. And
Yes,
so if
because they're interested in it.
exactly. And like I said, we're the
Interested
same
in,
as adults,
yeah.
we want to learn about what's interesting to us. So if we let children take the lead and we kind of follow alongside them, um again, not interrupting them, but kind of being that companion with it, in the experience, it is so much more effective. And they're going to be asking us to spell words that are important to them, not a word that our curriculum has designed, or something that goes with the theme. They want to know about their family and their friends, and that's what they want everything to connect to.
Absolutely. And if you just, I think what is difficult for teachers is that they go, oh God, I have to do all these things, and they're expecting me to do all these things. But what they don't recognize it is if children are in child initiated play, they're probably doing several of those things
Mm-hmm.
that are on your list. And if you can capture that in an image, if you can capture that in a running record, if you can
Mm-hmm.
capture that in a language sample, it would be really interesting. Even when I was a pre-K teacher, I would just go sit near, not in unless they invited me, near dramatic play, and I would just take a language sample and
Oh yeah.
And I did it like 3 times a year, in the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, at the end of the year, so that families could see that progress. And they would say, when were
Hmm.
they doing this? I said, they were playing in dramatic play.
Yeah.
Like, what? They were playing?
Yeah. That's their real world. That's their real world application right there. And that's where we see, what they know and what they like I said, how their language is progressing. And I think something too, if we are like observing and documenting, is one of the things I talk about in the book is I talk about getting very intricate in child development. So we're not just talking like fine motor skills, like we're talking separation of hand, proprioception. It's like getting as deep in as you can. And when you look at it that way, it really shows how the whole child is needed for literacy. It's not just that language, little aspect of it. It's really the whole child. And I think that helps us in justifying child-led play, and it helps us in our documentation of, okay, they were on the floor playing and I saw them reaching across their body to grab a block. Well, that's showing that midline development. Well, that's very critical on reading and writing, the body's ability to cross the midlines. But I think that helps us also with, again, explaining that a play does not have to be literacy based to support literacy.
Exactly.
Pretty much all play is supporting these foundations that children will need at some point when they start reading and writing.
Well, and I think you bring up such a great point. Learning is integrated. It's not
Mm-hmm.
siloed, right? We're going to pull out our reading books and we're going to read, or I'm going to sit down and read you a story, So it when they're in dramatic play, they're using vocabulary, they're
Mm-hmm.
using their social emotional skills, they're using their fine motor skills almost always. Sometimes they're using their gross motor skills. They're able to integrate all of those content areas and domains of development very easily when they're playing. And
Mm-hmm.
so teachers are always asking, so I know they need to write, right? And so, they do the whole, oh boy, um, put the bingo marker on the a letter, capital letter A, a lowercase letter A. So what other things can they do besides,
Well,
you know, because
yeah.
again, it's in isolation, the letter of the week, the color of the week, really,
Mm-hmm.
people, you don't need to do that. They care about the letters in their name when they're in pre-K, right? That's
Yes.
the only letters they care about.
Right. And they don't need a whole week of instruction to learn how to do the letter of their first name. And
Right.
well, it comes to letter formation, I think to me there's two different components to it. It's that physical development to support the handwriting.
Mhm.
And when we really look at children's bodies and how that develops and how the gross motor supports the fine motor, and we have our internal, our vestibular and proprioceptive systems that have to be developed, that
Mhm.
midline crossing, children's bodies are really not quite ready for that formal handwriting. And I mean, that dot to dot worksheet is really
Um,
kind of what I'm talking about there, until they're about like 6 years old. And I know that realistically, that's not, our standards are not supporting that. But I think that's one of the things that we need to get the conversation going on, respecting that developmental aspect of it. But then there is that component um, forming the letters correctly. And to me, instead of just doing like the bingo dots or whatever, I think it's us having opportunities to model that for young children.
mhm.
And, us finding those opportunities to write in front of them in authentic ways. I think having blank paper and crayons in the environment where children can draw when they want to, that leads to them coming to you and again going, how do I spell this? Or, if they tell me a story, do you want me to write it? And we can show that correct letter formation. And then we can do other things too. We can do like the tactile letters, you know, go outside, do sidewalk chalk, and like, take some spray bottles and spray it.
Mhm.
Um, but I also think it's important to realize that if children are not connecting with that letter, if it's not relevant to their lives, we can do all the things on the letter. They're not going to learn the letter. They're just going to do that task because we put it in front of them.
Mhm.
But it's really not going to resonate with them. So we've got to kind of have that interest and connection with the letters first too.
Well, and I really love what you're saying because I think people think, oh, well, they're four, so they need to learn to write. But if they are playing, and if
Hmm.
you have, big paper up on the fence outside and you give them spray bottles with either paint or watercolors in them, and this is, I
Uh-huh.
mean, think of the muscles they're building with just that spray bottle on their dominant hand.
Oh,
And
uh-huh.
oh my goodness, that's getting them. So I think we try to rush development, right? So,
Oh,
and I
yeah.
go back to parents. My child is 3 months old, but in 9 month old clothing. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so we haven't changed those clothes sizes for, decades. And, we're bigger now. So,
Uh-huh.
but it's okay. If that,
Yeah.
it's a source of pride for them, right?
Hmm.
That, oh, and then, I can't wait until they walk. So I'm going to put them on tummy time and when they're not ready, and I'm going to harm their shoulder and neck
Yeah.
because their head's the heaviest thing on their body. And I'm
Uh-huh.
putting them down and they can't see anything and they don't
Yeah.
like it. They cry and it's like, oh boy, okay. So we seem to want to rush, no matter how old they are.
Hmm.
We seem to want to rush development. I'm glad you said, really, they're not ready to do,
Hmm.
especially even Big Chief, right? The Big Chief,
Oh,
bigger,
yeah. Yes.
not till they're six, people. Come
Yeah.
on.
And one of the things I do in my trainings is when we talk about handwriting is I have everybody put their pencil in their non-dominant hand, which is the hand you don't write with, and I have them write. And of course, the handwriting looks completely different because we're not used to it. But one of the things I bring up is, again, it's a top down, middle out is how our body supports itself, and I will tell everybody, you'll notice that you'll start raising a shoulder, you'll raise an elbow, and the reason is I've given you a task that side of your body's not able to do, and you're compensating to do it. And
Yeah.
I said, if you are giving children worksheets and require them to do this dot to dot practice, whether it's letters or numbers, if you see them raising a shoulder, raising an arm, doing a death grip, doing something unusual with their body's telling you, I'm not ready for this task.
Oh,
I
that is
can't do it.
such a great thing for people to watch for because I think
Hmm.
we say, well, they just need practice.
Yeah, exactly.
So the practice should be Play-Doh and rolling pins.
Yeah, and even the climbing and everything too, because that neck and torso, the stability of that supports the mobility of the arm, and it goes all the way down. And so, even out on the playground, and that big body play is supporting handwriting.
Yes.
And it's a very handwriting is a very complex skill, and it's not a matter. One of the things I say repeatedly in the book, it's not a matter of teaching; it's a matter of developing. And it's not a matter of us just putting a pencil in a child's hand and go and hold it like this. Their
Mhm.
body has to be developed to support that. And their cues, their actions are telling us if they're ready for that or not. And most of the time they're not because we're not allowing them to play and run and move and
Mhm.
develop their bodies as they should. So that's a task that they're just not quite ready for.
So, and the more that we take away, and I'm thinking about kindergarten, first and second grade. I hope this is not happening in preschool programs. So if it is, people, you need to email me. Um, it's interesting how schools reduce recess because they're trying to catch children up, right? Not recognizing that what they're doing is keeping their goal from happening. And
Hmm.
so, how do we help administrators and superintendents and principals recognize the importance of recess more than once a day for children? And it was really interesting. I was just presenting at a conference, and each of the sessions were an hour and 15 minutes long. And these were adults.
Hmm.
Not even adults can sit for an hour and 15 minutes. So why do
Yeah.
we expect children to be able to do
Yes. Yeah. And it's, and I think as more of our 3 and 4 year olds are going into elementary schools, we're going to see more of that, their limited recess time. And,
that? Mhm.
because we start panicking that they're behind, which they might be behind the standards, but the standards are not
Uh,
always developmentally appropriate. So
right.
I think that nothing will change unless we get the conversation going.
Mhm.
And nothing will change overnight, but no change will happen if we don't just start talking about it and going to our administrators. And I think when we can intricately explain child development and how, you know, those how that happens and how play is important for that and how that outside time supports it, and then how all those developmental foundations will support the academics when the time is right.
Right.
But I think
Yeah.
if we can start making those connections, and but just really showing how development is such a key piece of this that we're really not, again, respecting. So I think
Mhm.
it's just getting the conversation going, um, and being able to say, okay, here are the things that we need to be doing, and this is why, and this is how it's really going to benefit everyone. Hopefully, at some point,
Well, I
hopefully
think,
something will start to change.
yeah, they'll start to change. And I think we need to start writing for administrator
Hmm.
publications that really outline that you have wonderful intentions,
Hmm.
but what you're doing is not helping you reach your goals. And
Hmm.
here's, three things you should try for 6 months and see if you see a difference in the classrooms. Um,
Hmm.
a- and for directors who have parents that are like, when are they going to learn to read? Because families are so concerned, they know
Yeah.
what's coming. And so families are so stressed out about the expectations that are unrealistic and not aligned with development that that they panic. And so then directors go, oh, I have to have families enrolled in my building, so I need to do what parents want instead of what I need, instead of advocating for what development needs, right? So
Hmm.
I think it's those I think it's those struggles that keep people from thinking about, is what I'm doing aligned with developmental milestones? So
Hmm.
I don't know what your state standards are. The pre-K ones in Pennsylvania are pretty good. But they're still, I mean, they have emerging too, which is where everybody goes. Oh, I'm like, back up.
Yeah.
That's scaffolding a child who might be more developed in that
Uh-huh.
particular area. That is not for a typically developing child. So it is a struggle, I think, for us to help parents see that what we're doing when we're allowing children to have play that is unstructured and not
Hmm.
adult directed. The when people say, oh, we play, but we rotate centers every 15 minutes.
Hmm.
I'm like, that's not play.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not that, it's not.
That's not play. And but they think that they're offering choice. And I said, there's no choice there. You told them where to go and you told them that what to do every 15 minutes. That's not
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah.
So I don't know what other arguments we can make, except for maybe go back to your developmental milestone charts by Giselle.
Hmm.
Maybe that will help you understand that what is expected is not what is aligned with where they are developmentally.
Yes.
And what
And,
other tips we give them?
I think on like having like the conversations to just be confident, and knowing that what you're advocating for is right for children.
Mhm.
And I also think too, anytime we're talking with stakeholders, and you kind of, mentioned this, but you have to meet them where they are. And so, understanding that parents of young children today have been marketed to as to
Mhm.
these toys are going to make your children smarter, or your children need to get ahead. And so recognizing the stress that they have and meeting them there. Okay, I understand, and I know that you're excited about this, or I know you're worried about this, but let me show you. And and kind of getting on that same page. And with our elementary schools that our children might feed into, having those conversations. I understand that you feel you need children to be at this point when they get to you, but let me show you, how much more effective this is. But I think kind of meeting whatever stakeholder you're having the conversation with, meeting them where they are, and then kind of taking the conversation from there.
So, so there was before COVID, I was able to work with principals and superintendents on early childhood, right?
Mm.
And these these poor principals and superintendents, because it was a choice, they chose that particular 5-day session out of a plethora of sessions. And so I would
Mm-hmm.
ask them, "Why are you here?"
Yeah.
And they would go, "I was a principal in a secondary high school, and that's where my degree is and where my teaching experience is. All of a sudden, I'm in an elementary school.
Well,
I have no idea what I'm doing." And they were so honest and so earnest about
hmm
not saying, "Listen, I am in a different swimming pool on a different planet. I really
yeah.
am not quite sure where to start." And so we would start with development.
hmm
And, the other thing that was really interesting to me is I would say, if you walk into a kindergarten classroom, what do you want to see? I want to see engaged children,
hmm
happy, focused, excited. And I said, and when you walk into kindergarten classrooms right now, what are you seeing? Frustration,
hmm
crying.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, okay, that's a great place to start. I wonder why
Uh-huh.
that's happening, right? So it is, what do you want to see? And here's a way to make it happen
hmm
instead of large groups, teacher directed worksheets, all of the stuff that we know doesn't work.
Right.
So, whew, we have a lot to do, Stacy. We
Yeah.
can
We
just
have
have
our
to,
work cut.
we have our work cut out for
Yeah.
us. So, do you have any final comments before we close out for today? This has been wonderful.
Oh, no, just, again, encouraging that child-led play, and just really, I encourage everybody, watch children they're playing, and just really start seeking out and respecting all that's developing. And again, it doesn't have to be literacy based to support future literacy, but um, just getting back to the roots of child-led play and learning more and more about child development. I think that helps us in the conversation, helps us in our practice, and hopefully will help make some changes too.
Yeah, and just be persistent. And
hmm
many of you just taking out the developmental milestones, and even in your, if you have little hints or tips that you give to parents, like in when I was a director and we had infant, toddler, preschool, and school age before and after school, and especially in the infant room, the teachers would say, "Here's where your child is developmentally. Here's what's coming next," right?
hmm
So that parents would not be worried about it. They would do an observation, figure out where the child was developmentally, and they would say, "Be watching for this next phase of development because this is what's coming next. And here's 2 or 3 things you can do to support it." And we had those cards made up, and not every child at 6 months of age was on the same developmental level. So wherever they were, we didn't have any age on it. We just said, "Here's where your child is. Here's
Yeah.
what's coming next. Here's 2 or 3 things you can do to support them." And boy, did that help parents feel better.
Oh, I bet.
And so if you can think about that developmentally, not standard wise, though if you need to, you can align it with standards, but developmentally, here's where your 3
hmm
year old is.
Uh-huh.
And they don't have 3 year olds at the top. It just says where they are developmentally, what's coming next, and 2 or 3 things parents can support them, which should include play.
hmm Yes, yeah.
All right. I think we've solved all the world's
I
problems.
think so.
So hang on, Stacy, while I close this out. To learn more about IPA USA, please visit our website at IPAUSA.org. And until next time, keep on playing.